let's get started. This is the monthly meeting for our specification team, the North America-Asia meeting. Earlier in the month, we had a North America and Europe meeting. The purpose of this meeting is to go over the project news, have a look at our spec work, and also describe what's happening over in the education work group. So this is sort of the meeting for the very heart of the OpenChain project, global activity. Before we start, I'll show the antitrust policy notice. We show this at the beginning of every meeting. So the full antitrust policy can be found on the Linux Foundation website. If you're from a member company, you can ask questions of our council, Andy Updegrove. This meeting follows a regular agenda: news, work on standards, work on reference material, a space for any other business, and the close of the meeting. Jumping straight in, the news is a little bit longer than usual this call, and all of it is quite good. Just to flag the first thing, as we always do, the global project meetings every week. And the global project meetings this week are pretty quiet. We are going to have just one meeting, the call today. The reason is just happenstance. This is the period of the month where things can quieten down. Now, while things are quiet on the global meeting front, things are busy in the general news. Something that was announced last week at an event in Japan, and of course is very much flagging again this week, is that Socionext has announced OpenChain conformance recertification. And this is a process that happens every 18 months for companies using the OpenChain standards. It's a mandatory part of the specification, but it's voluntary to let us know and do public relations around it. In recent times, we've had BlackBerry and Socionext partner with us to discuss the activity they've done on recertification and encourage others. Now we have some other interesting news in the core of the project. So something that's a global activity and quite interesting to many parties. Our AI study group has been quite busy. The monthly North America and Europe workshop has been published. We had some strong contributions from Fujitsu regarding what they're talking about around the activities on their concerns around generative AI and copyright. And we had an overview from the OSI executive director, Stefano, about what they're doing on the AI definition. The AI definition is quite different to what we're looking at. We're looking at the supply chain. We're looking at compliance in the supply chain. But of course, the AI definition that they're currently drafting is important, and it's feature complete. You'll also see a link to the Asia Sync call. I've pasted these links into the chat so that everyone can access them easily. It's been a super busy month for conferences, attending events. And one of the first was the FinOS member meeting. There was a discussion regarding the open source readiness special interest group and OpenChain, what we do, how it can help the finance industry, and so on. This is quite important. We've seen more and more finance companies, whether banks like Yoma Bank or Kakao Bank, or investment organizations like BlackRock, adopting our standards. So we were talking with a wide audience, and I'm looking forward to follow-up discussions one-to-one. There was an executive briefing in Tokyo This executive briefing it was busy. There were quite a lot of people there, and it was a great opportunity to explain how OpenChain fits into the Linux Foundation ecosystem. That was last week, and I was with my colleagues like Jim Zemlin. I was with Omkar, Daniela, and many others talking about what's going on. This event was also the first time I got to meet Matt, the new person leading the PyTorch project. He comes from many years in the AI space and is a really interesting person to talk to. I dropped by the AI Innovation Day in Tokyo as well. I was just there to meet people, network a little bit. I found it very interesting. It's a space where, of course, many people don't know about OpenChain yet, but it's also a space where, at least at this event, a lot of interesting work was being shown to indicate improvements around AI in different languages. There was a great presentation around the middle of the day about an AI trained on Japanese language resources. And while things like ChatGPT appear to have used a small amount of Japanese resources, the training of this model was substantial, and therefore the improvements it offered were interesting. Anyway, from the people I talked with, oh, I just saw something posted here from Kubota-san at the community call, monthly community call, 9 a.m. China Central Time on third Tuesday. Okay, Kubota-san, uh, thanks for flagging that. That's a legacy invite. The current invite um, says this, and it's on LFX, not another Zoom link. So please delete the legacy invite.
Oh,
You should have another invite, but I can resend it to you for this monthly meeting.
okay. Thank you. Sorry.
No, it's really good to flag this. So for people who are watching the recording and wondering about the pause, Kubota-san was just flagging that an older invitation for this meeting was apparently existing in his calendar. It's a legacy invite from last year, actually. And if people have an invite where they accidentally enter a room that's quiet, that's silent, please go to openchain.org/participate to find the actual current schedule and the correct links to join every meeting. There have been cases, and I think this is what impacted Kubota-san, where meeting invitations were updated, but on people's personal calendars, especially in Outlook for some reason, the data was not updated. So they ended up with an orphan invite with the wrong details. Anyway, if it ever happens that you enter a blank meeting, please check openchain.org, openchainproject.org/participate, and you'll find the correct dial-in link there. Just to help people who might be watching, this is what the page looks like, and you can see the global calendar has every meeting, and you can see the links are listed in it. Thank you very much, Kubota-san. Super useful to flag. Now, I'm just going back to my slides. I'm going to pause for a second here, just to take any questions about the various conferences that I was at, or any comments as well. Okay, I'm going to move on. Um, we had some great webinars recently. I'm putting the links in the chat. And naturally, if you're watching the recording, you'll also be able to access the slides and links from there. One of the webinars has been flagged before, but it's very important, and therefore I want to flag it again. There was an OFE briefing on the Cyber Resilience Act. Now, OFE, Open Forum Europe, is a policy organization that has been at the center of discussing open source and other open technologies in the context of the Cyber Resiliency Act. So this webinar is super important. The second webinar I wanted to flag, it just happened last week, was about end-to-end SCA with open source tooling, but also open source data, open data. And the interesting thing, therefore, is that the About Code ecosystem now offers everything you could need to set up your own hosted open SCA, the tools and the data. And it does that under licenses that are unrestricted. So the primary company behind it, NextB, is ensuring that there's no fundamental restrictions to using the technology and having an SCA solution. The webinar is important because this now opens the door further to small suppliers being able to have professional automation. I think that's super, super important. We've got more webinars coming. You'll see an announcement this week about another webinar from OFE. So it's going to be another policy webinar, and that will happen next week. It will be focused on one of the hot topics around the European Union area, the EU AI Act, the first legislation in the world related to AI. Okay, that's all the news. Let's move to the work on the standards and core material. So all of our open issues on our two ISO standards are here. We are capturing issues and discussing ideas for the next generation drafts, and everyone in the world is invited to look at the issues and contribute via GitHub. And of course, this call and our specification mailing list. On the last North America and Europe call, we were working on something that we started here, North America, Asia. I've just put the links into the chat. We were working on one issue related to the security assurance standard and one related to license compliance. The idea here was to talk through some issues about A, on security expanding definitions, and B, on license compliance, potentially adding a requirement for verification material around training. On that call, we completed our activities around both suggested improvements, but we decided to wait 2 weeks until this call to allow any comments to come in. And after that period, we would close the issues on this call. We also added one new issue, which was something which would change the license compliance standard, which is the review cycle, the recertification cycle. I want to paste this stuff into the chat so people can follow along if they're watching live. And of course, to ensure that people watching this recorded can get the links, don't forget the slides will be where the recording is. Okay, the security assurance standard. I'm going to move to that screen now. This was a relatively big issue. This issue was covered over a couple of calls from middle April. And essentially, it was about expanding the definitions to add secure software development and to expand security testing. Now, the definitions are different to the requirements of the spec. They're a little easier to adjust because it won't change any detail of conformance. It will just change the context, how people should understand what we mean by something like secure software, or what we mean by something like security testing. There's a note here from Kubota-san that we should check out S2C2F to ensure alignment with the security spec. And just pulling this out. Yeah. Right. So this is the secure supply chain consumption for open source dependencies in a company workflow. So it's about how to engage and download and use open source software in a production workflow. Now, as it happens, I had a call quite recently with the OpenSSF team. So I had a call last week, I believe. I'll just pull it up. Apologies for the delay. My calendar is so busy, it's hard to find the exact details. Oh my goodness. I just noticed that my recent travel schedule was so intense that I was in places like Hong Kong less than 2 weeks ago. Okay, right. So I had a call talking with Jay White about exactly this topic. I had that call on the 16th, so just a couple of days ago, copying and pasting in how we set the context. Basically, the call was a really good discussion about what they're trying to do with the S2CF, S2C2F. And we were discussing how what they're doing and OpenChain's security standard are complementary. We went through some details of their document, and basically, this is a very quick summary. Basically, what they're doing is more on the implementation side. So we're setting the overall context, and then they're explaining how to do some aspects of the implementation side. And the same applies in some ways to Salsa SL SA. So, Salsa, as Kubota-san said, is sort of for community management. S2C2F is for consumer companies. But both of them are more about the implementation methodologies, and we're more about the overall top-level process. What we're going to do in terms of coordinating with OpenSSF is that the S2C2F work group behind it is going to coordinate with us and look how in the definitions and so on we can reference each other as examples. S2C2F is also preparing a potential submission through JDF to make a standard. Their submission already included OpenChain in the explanatory letter. But in terms of the actual document, yes, there's more work to do to explain how we relate to each other. But the relationship is OpenChain is much higher level. They're more in the implementation level. There is no conflict identified at this juncture between the teams. But there will be a point very soon, I imagine, where S2CF, C2F team and OpenChain team will be taking a look at each other's material and suggesting where in the references, not the requirements, but the references, can we cite each other to ensure the relationships are very clear. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. And perfect timing, Kubota-san and Ninjoji-san as well. Great question. And exactly what we need to ask. How does our work relate to other work? How do we fit together? And if we are ever doing the same thing, how do we make sure the duplication is removed? In this case, it seems there's no duplication. There's just a great chance to work together, high level and implementation level, very similar to OpenChain and SPDX. OpenChain says have an SBOM. SPDX explains an SBOM format. So S2C2F is similar relationship. Okay. Now, just going back to the issue on the security spec about definitions, just putting that in the chat. Adding secure software development, expanding security testing. So we started the conversation in April, and we evolved it in early May, so the North America Europe call, with suggested language for adding security testing and an evolution of this, sorry, a suggestion for adding secure software development and a suggestion for a more detailed security testing description. Instead of having one sentence saying, have a process for analysis and monitoring of your software for known vulnerabilities, including a note that it could include static application security testing and dynamic application security testing, pen testing, malware testing, or SCA scanning. The whole reason for that would be to ensure that options for doing this would be easily understood. Remember, this is the definition section, not the requirements section. Options would be easily understood by readers. So even if they didn't really know about how would I check and monitor for, let's say, known vulnerabilities, this would help them understand it better. It was also changed from known vulnerabilities to known and unknown vulnerabilities. Again, just to set the context that this is the kind of stuff you could and should be looking at in the security field. Chris had a second adjustment suggested. Chris is our chair, of course. By the way, Chris is not on this call, and he wasn't on the last couple of calls. Chris is out on medical leave, so I've been leading the calls while he's doing that. I expect to coordinate with Chris tomorrow and have details on his return as our chair at that point. Okay. I'm just reading Chris's potential suggestion because it's longer than the last one. And I'm going to tell you what he changed because this is my first time to see it. Okay. Okay. He added a sentence including NIST Secure Software Development Framework for best practices. So basically then we go from one sentence to three about security testing. And we have two changes from the last language. We talked about examples, static and dynamic security interactions. This may, he changed that to this would. And he added the reference to the NIST Secure Software Development Framework as a for instance. Okay, and he added a sentence, static and dynamic linking of libraries to applications is a licensing area of concern. 3 items. This would instead of this may. the addition of an example of the NIST item, and also talking about linking of libraries as a licensing area of concern. I want to raise three things. We had this May because we wanted to make sure it wasn't understood as prescriptive. This would sounds potentially more prescriptive. That might be something we want to avoid. To check that, I'm going to open the specification, and inside our specification, we have a description of what terms are meant to mean. Keywords: must, must not, should, recommended, should not, may. Okay. Would is not included in the definitions from IETF RFC 2119, which is the basis for how we fix our language. So we used may, which was not included, and he used would, which is not included. It sounds like we have two options: should, which means recommended, and there should be a good reason not to do that, and may, which means entirely optional. It sounds to me like oh, sorry, there is may there. Our may, entirely optional, was in his suggestion. It sounded like he was moving to something like should, which means recommended. In that context, moving from may, entirely optional, to recommended, this would or this should, sounds reasonable. Do you think it's reasonable to move from entirely optional, static and dynamic analysis, to recommended, to use static and dynamic analysis? What do you think? Is that too heavy, or is it rational in a way that would help guide people that this is what you would really benefit from doing? So moving from totally optional to recommended that you do this. If no one has a negative opinion, I think that his totally optional to recommended, and you'd need a reason for not doing it, is not unfair. Static and dynamic security analysis is pretty much the de facto standard of how you do things in security. So in that case, I think we could take his language. So by our definitions included at the beginning of the standard, we should change it from this would to this should. Does anyone have any objections to that? Okay. If not, I'm going to put a note. Action item 1. This may include addressing. Change to okay, so he also changed software into action to static security testing and dynamic security testing. Oh, right, Kubota-san. Great question.
Sorry, I'm not good at English. So the
You,
meaning, the difference between would and should is I couldn't deeply understood.
there's no real difference, to be honest. Would and should, no real difference. Our challenge is just that there's some keywords for using in the standards, and the two keywords that we have are should or may. Would is not a keyword, but should and would mean the same. So our real option is we currently said may, which is totally optional. And the other option is to change to should, which means recommended, and you'd need a reason not to do this.
Yeah, I'm agree. If the would means that same meaning with should.
Yep. Do you have any objection if we move from may, which is optional, to should, which is recommended? You should do this.
I don't have any objection at this perspective.
Okay.
Shane,
Yeah.
can I confirm, clarify the you will okay. You use should in the last conclusion.
Yep. Yeah. The change
Should.
would be from this may include
Mm-hmm.
static and dynamic into this would include, this should include.
Mm.
And that means it goes from optional to recommended. So
Okay. For the non-native, the would is very difficult, I think.
Yep, I agree.
So please use the should.
Well, the good news is that we have a text language which comes from IETF.
Mm.
And what it does is it
Mm.
redefines the words,
Mm.
each one having a meaning
Yes.
for the standards.
Yes.
Yeah, which I think is useful because there's no interpretation left.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying here should means this, and they don't care. Different opinions of it. So yeah, that's a great point. Okay. I'm going to mark that as accepted. Theory. Okay. Boom. So that's the first part. Second part is a new line, which is adding the NIST. For instance, refer to NSIT Secure Software Development Framework for best practices. I think adding a line like that sounds totally fine, because it's just an example, and it's a really concrete example. I think adding that example in the references section, which is meant to set context, makes a lot of sense, and it can do no harm. What do you think? Again, it's not a requirement. It's just a reference, and it would be intended if people read, for instance, static analysis and dynamic analysis and thought, yes, but how? They can go here and see how.
I'm not familiar with secure software development framework, but are there any possibility to change the document name or document number in the future?
That's a good question. Let's take a look. No. Because it's marked as a publication. So it is very specifically a publication and version. So to address your concern, it sounds like to prevent anything changing, we can and should cite the exact version. What do you think?
I'm not a security person, but my understanding is the how to say kind of international joint statement named "Secure by Design" is published in the last year. And also Japan and America and the other 14 country organizations have signed. And in that document, the SSDF is default to recommend to the software developers to introduce their internal software development process. So in that sense, SSDF is a key essential concept for the secure development, my understanding. So, I'm sorry. Repeatedly, I'm not a security person, but it seems it's okay. We are, how to say, aware of the SFDF in the context of OpenChain.
And what might be useful, I noticed that they had a thing saying that NIST SP 800-218, Secure Software Development Framework version 1.1, supersedes or replaces something from the past. And just going to that thing from the past, this is mitigating the risk of vulnerabilities, blah, blah, blah. What's good is it says when it's withdrawn and it shows the replacement.
Yeah.
So if we use this one and say the exact version, when it changes, it will have a note changed, replaced. So people can easily move to the new one, even if we cite it. And if we cite the exact version, there can be no confusion, like it suddenly changed. Which one were we talking about? We can say, oh, this one. Okay, let me make a note about this. Note raised. Oh, and don't worry that no one is a super security expert. What we're actually doing here, and it's really important, is this has to be readable mostly by people who are not security experts. Because this will be procurement and supply chain and OSPOs, and they might have to go find the security expert, or inside the company, it might be the first time they do security. Okay. Just looking how they do it in the website. Oh, I'm just taking the exact language from the website. Okay. So what we have, Chris had referred to the secure development framework and the standard number. If we take the full exact text, the organization, the standard number, the name, and the version for best practices. So that seems to cover all the discussion. Okay, we have the word optional, may for optional. Maybe we could say, could we say something like that? Instead of saying, for instance, refer to this, say, for instance, this may include using that. And the reason I brought this up is because we had a question in the chat. What exactly does refer mean? And we know the standard word means optional. So maybe instead of saying refer, we could use our standard word may and give the total full version a name. So we're saying, for example, optionally use organization, standard number, standard name, version this for best practices. And we had a security expert with Chris citing it, so we know it's good. We're just improving the language to make it clear, optional, and totally full name and version, so people go exactly where Chris is currently talking about. What do you think? If there's no objection, I think that actually covers all of the points we made on the call. If you think I missed something about the points you raised, please let me know. But I think it includes his comment, but it changes it to use the standard language, and it includes the exact current version. So there's zero ambiguity. So I think that adds his sentence for the extra example. It uses our standard language, and it totally makes sure it's the right version.
Sorry, Shane.
Yeah.
My intention is, I think it shouldn't be cite the version, because if the secure software development framework is a common name and it will not be changed in the future, we should remove the version number, I think. But if we'd like to describe just an example, we should describe the concrete version, I think.
That's a good point. In this case, if we use the word may, it means totally optional. And it might be because a particular marketplace requires it, etc., etc. So the question is, does Secure Software Development Framework, SSDF, stay the same or change? And actually, I have an answer. We see that this is a standard that replaces another one. If we go to the old one, we see that they talk about Secure Software Development Framework as well. So we know that the phrase secure software development can change standards. It's used in both. So we can't be sure that they won't change this again to another version, or even a completely different name standard that still says Secure Software Development Framework. For that reason, citing the version Kubota-san seems to fit with exactly what you said. It might change, and it's only an example.
Thank you. But I'm not sure they use NIST SP 800 and 218 for version 1.2 or version 2.0. I'm not sure.
Yeah, yeah. I think we've got no idea.
Mhm.
For that reason, yeah. Oh, Ninjoji-san, he thinks actually it's fine if we just use the standard name and not the version. I guess that's a good point. I mean, what both of you suggested there, if we remove the version number, we're relying on NIST not to change the standard number itself too much. That sounds, it sounds reasonable. Why don't we do that? We remove the version number, we're citing the standard and its name. They might increase the version number, but we can assume that if they do, it's not that they're going to get rid of the, the secure software development framework itself. They'll just improve it. So, okay, let's remove the version number. Okay. 2 people on the call said, let's remove the version number. Good reasons for saying it. Only one person suggested the version number, therefore we don't include it. And I agree with you. It's good reasons not to include it. So therefore, accepted with the language changed from refer to the standard this may, using the exact name from their website. It's the same as this, it's just the exact order of words that they used on their website, and the addition makes sense. Okay, adding that. Good, good. Action item 3. Action item 3. This is the last part of Chris's suggestions. Okay. This is under the definition of security testing. Chris suggested we add, I guess, a kind of a clarification. Talking about static and dynamic linking is a licensing area of concern. The section is about security testing, and it talks about static and dynamic security analysis techniques. I can understand that Chris added static and dynamic linking of libraries to applications is a licensing area of concern as a type of clarification. But I don't think our section security testing made any reference to static or dynamic linking of libraries. It just talked about static or dynamic security analysis. And therefore, I don't think that sentence is needed. We're talking about static and dynamic security analysis. We're not talking about static and dynamic linking of libraries. And Chris flagged it's a licensing area of concern, but we're only talking about security testing in the definition. So I think in this case, it might cause confusion to include a off-topic, similar sounding point for people who don't know security and need to focus on the security definitions for the security topic, not get distracted. What do you think?
So sorry, what is the point? I
Oh.
think the linking analysis is very important for the security. I agree to you. And what is the point?
Oh, my point is that
Mm.
this would only, okay, actually that kind of that kind of helps my point. Okay. Okay, so security testing definition is focused on referencing okay.
Mm.
So static application security testing or dynamic application security testing, which actually is not about libraries or linking at all. Of course, if you do static application security testing to software, anything, whether it's application or library, or you do dynamic application security testing, software, anything, it could be application or library, that helps you with security issues. Static and dynamic linking of libraries is actually a separate topic. It's not about the security testing per se, it's about the methodology of the software build.
Mm.
So I think it might add confusion because static and dynamic in this context only refers to security testing. And static and dynamic in this context is not limited to libraries. It's just all the software.
Ah, I see. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
So I actually think accidentally talking about static and dynamic linking of libraries makes it more confusing.
Mm. Yeah.
Okay. Section. Okay. So basically I'm saying it sounds similar, but it's totally different. So therefore it doesn't belong under security testing. It could go somewhere else.
Eh,
Okay, we've done it.
Yeah. Sorry. The above the middle of the sentence this would include using technical. Yeah. What is the word?
Oh
Do you
God.
change?
Yeah,
Do
I
you
made a
change the
mistake.
should?
Yeah, you're right. Thank you. Thank you. I made a mistake. I copy pasted Chris's original language instead of our fixed one.
Ah, okay.
There we go. This should. Thank you for Gucci-san.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I nearly made a mistake there. Yep. Okay,
Okay. Thank you.
thank you. All right, let me put it together. Let me put it together. What we've done on this call. What we've done on this call is okay. We have taken improvement on improvement on improvement, and we have resulted in, oh, it won't allow me to increase the size of my comment. Let me post it. We've taken Chris's final improvements, and we've changed would to should. We've accepted the addition of the NIST reference, but we used the exact title that NIST used on their website. And we got rid of the reference to static and dynamic libraries because that's a different topic to static application and dynamic application security testing, and we don't want to confuse people. With that, I think we've fixed it. What do you think?
I think it's okay.
Okay. All right. Issues closed. Woo! That was more difficult than I thought it would be. For a good reason. Good news is the next one, and we only have a couple of minutes, but we don't need time. The next one had no additional comments. This is about verification material for training. We went over this on our last Asia call. We went over this on the last Europe call. Okay. Very short version. We had a gap. We basically had a gap where we didn't actually say make sure people are trained. We said have a training program, but we didn't say make sure people are trained. Sorry, yeah, in general, we said something, we didn't have the training mentioned explicitly. And we basically said that we were looking at fixing it by changing the policy section, the verification material, rationale, and so on, just a little bit by, what were we doing? Oh, we weren't changing the policy material. Okay, I apologize. Keeping the policy section as is, but expanding the awareness section by adding a section saying documented awareness. So in other words, documenting that people were trained. So Andrew's point was we didn't actually say make sure people are trained. And we said, well, that's a good point. We said the material should exist, but we never said make sure the people are trained. So we added the section make sure people are trained. There was a 2-week comment period for that, and no new comments came in. So it seems having the training program documented and having it documented that people were trained is perfectly reasonable. Having only the training program documented, but not including make sure people are trained, leaves a gap. Are you okay with closing that gap? Do you have any objections? So again, it's going from have training material, but nothing else, to have training material and make sure people went through the training. Seems reasonable. And because we had it open for comments and no comments came in, this will be marked as closed and to be merged with 3.0 draft. No objections raised. Okay, if there's no objections raised, this will be merged. If you do have an objection in the future, you can come back to this issue and object. We've gone very quickly through it because it was covered in 2 previous calls. And because it was covered in 2 previous calls and no comments came in, it's seen as complete. Okay, we are out of time. So I'm going to skip the last item, which was a new suggestion. That will be covered in the next call. I'm going to flag that on our reference material, We had a call in early May on the reference material. You can check the link here. They're doing a ton of work on the guides, training materials, supplier education. And on May 14th, they completed some deadlines. So that material will go into your hands very shortly in final draft. You can check the education mailing list for that. There's a space for any other business. Does anyone have any other topics they want to raise today? If not, we'll close this meeting. I want to thank you for being here. We did a lot of work on some security definitions language. That's because we had a comment in the last 2-week comment period. I did a super fast recap of a change to the licensing spec, which adds a requirement for an assessment. The reason the recap was super quick is because we covered it on the previous Asia call, we covered it on the previous Europe call, and we had a 2-week comment period that closed. So I was just flagging we're closing it indeed, because nothing was raised. And I gave an opportunity on this call, a brief opportunity for people to object. For those who might be new, don't worry. You can reread the issues, and if something bothers you, you can still reopen them. Okay, so I'm putting the 2 issues into the chat. These are the 2 items we closed, one on security, one on licensing. If you have any concerns, you can reopen the issues. Meanwhile, because they're closed, I will merge this draft language into the draft specs. Final note, don't worry if you think we're about to change the standards. For instance, licensing is including a new term saying not only have documented evidence that training exists, but have documented evidence that people took the training. That's a new term. It's a term we had implied before. We expected people to take the training. We're just making it explicit, but it's a new term. And if you're worried about that, even though the issue is closed, you can reopen the issue. And even though that term is being added to the draft, it's not like we're updating the ISO standard quickly. Remember, the drafts are discussed here. Eventually, they go to a steering committee, which then reviews them again and votes if they go into the standard. But before they go into the standard formally, there's a public comment period and a freeze period. So there's a ton of opportunity if you do have a concern or your colleagues have a concern to flag and adjust the standards in future. That's for the benefit of people who might be on the call who are new or people who are watching the call who are new. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your wonderful contributions. I'll merge the data from this call and I'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you too. It's great to have you here. Good day. Bye.